Hello everyone, this is Zach, and welcome to episode 4 of the Day and the Night in the Desert podcast. I'm your co-host Zach, joined by the host James Knight. How's it going, James?
It's going really well. I'm excited to be here. Excited to continue doing the show with you, Zach.
It's going to be awesome. I'm sorry I wasn't there for episode 3, but from now on I'll be here.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun getting into our content today. We're going to cover a few things Jazz and Mammoth and other Utah sports related, a little bit of Utah and BYU basketball, but we are going to pivot into some other things. There's a lot of news to get into with regards to the NFL and the NBA today, so we're going to pivot a little bit today. I know this is a Utah sports podcast, but I think from time to time there is a place where we need to cover other sports, such as the NFL or the NBA, if big news is happening, which it is today. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk a little bit about the Utes and BYU basketball. This will be a relatively brief segment on this before we get into the rest of it. The Utes lost in round 1 of the Big 12 tournament to Cincinnati, 73-66. Terrence Brown led all scorers for the Utes with 22 points, and the Utes only had 3 players in double figures. Forward Keanu Dawes had 15 points and 12 rebounds, while Seydou Traore also added 12 points to that. But the Utes season obviously over in very disappointing fashion. They lose to Cincinnati in the first round of the Big 12 tournament. That will end their run as the worst team in the Big 12. Your thoughts on that, Z?
I wasn't so shocked about that, but this year was a really disappointing year due to the fact I'm not going to totally call him out, but I think it was Mark Harlan's fault for how he has run this athletics program and how he has turned this basketball program into a losing stock rather than a winning stock. And I think that hopefully Alex Jensen will turn this thing around either next year or in the coming years. He just needs to recruit good. He needs to bring in some better coaches. And the fan base needs to obviously grow because we don't sell out half of our games. Hopefully that will change.
I totally second everything you're saying, and obviously it doesn't help when the athletic director is alienating the fan base. He's getting rid of coaches he shouldn't be getting rid of. And it's kind of just been a mess ever since he's taken over for Chris Sale a few years ago. And obviously, I'm still optimistic about Utah athletics going forward, but I still think it's incredibly disappointing what has happened, especially to their basketball program over the last few years. But hopefully things get better from here. We're going to transition into a little bit of different news. We'll be very brief on this before we get into the majority of our content today. But AJ DeBonsa set the Big 12 tournament freshman scoring record with 40 points in a win over Kansas State in the first round of the Big 12 tournament. He was one of 4 players in double figures for the Cougars. Kennard Davis added 15 points, and Robert Wright added 14 points in a big-time win for BYU. And it was led by BYU's massive second half, where they outscored the Kansas State Wildcats 55-42, and BYU will face West Virginia in the next round. That's all I'm going to cover there, because we got to get into some NBA stuff. With the Utah Jazz winning over the Golden State Warriors, 119-116. Bryce Sensabaugh with 21 points. Obviously, the Warriors were very understaffed without Steph Curry and Kristaps Porzingis and others. It was a very tough night for the Warriors. Blake Hinson, one of our relatively new players on the Jazz, I talked about him on episode 3. He made a go-ahead three-pointer in the final minute in a 119-116 win. Hinson made 4 three-pointers overall, including one from the right arc with 29 seconds remaining. Kyle Filipowski added 19 and 15 for Utah. And the Jazz ultimately coming away with a big-time win. Your thoughts on that, Z?
I really liked how the team came out ready to play and ready to go with all their players who are stepping up in absence of Jaren Jackson Jr., Larry Markkinen, and some other key players.
Yeah, certainly, and it was certainly a big night for the Jazz. Obviously, I still root for the Jazz to win, despite us needing a draft pick. Elijah Harkless is also another name that hasn't really been mentioned a ton with regards to the Jazz. He hit the 2 game-winning free throws and had a career-high 16 points. So we're getting a lot of great contributions from our role guys, and I think if we can get those contributions from our role guys, combined with guys like Lauri Markkinen and Jaren Jackson coming back, and maybe getting some trades here or there, I think we're going to have a really good team next year, and I'm very optimistic about the future of the Jazz, because clearly we can score with anybody. Obviously, we have been inconsistent on defense a little bit, and maybe sometimes on offense, but looks very optimistic outlook going forward for the Utah Jazz, and I think that's going to be a story going forward. And obviously, another key in that game was the Warriors missing free throws. We saw Podziemski miss 4 free throws in the fourth quarter, and they were really struggling to just close out down the stretch. Were the Warriors. Obviously, they came back a little bit in that fourth quarter, but ultimately it just wasn't enough. They missed a few key shots down the stretch. You know, the Jazz role players stepped up and did their part, even without some of the stars like Jaren Jackson and Lauri Markkanen in action. So, anything to add to that?
I really like just the outline of the game, how guys stepped up when key players were out, especially Elijah Harkless. I haven't watched much of him at all this year because due to the G League, but since he was brought up, he's been doing really well, and I hope he can still get his game into groove in the coming years so that he can be a main roster guy. And I think he has a bright future.
Well, and sadly, the bright future is really not in the present for the Utah Mammoth. They've lost back-to-back games now. A 5-0 loss to Minnesota tonight. Obviously not the way we wanted to play. And a 3-2 loss to Chicago the other night. Obviously, it's been a tough couple of games for the Mammoth. We haven't really covered that too much. Dylan Gunther, one bright spot. He hit 30 goals this year against Chicago, but certainly not the couple of games we would have wanted. I think we're going to end off on Utah sports for now. We'll keep you guys posted on the Mammoth and the Jazz and all that coming up. But we got some way bigger things to get into. First, we got to talk about NFL free agency. There's been some big-time trades going on. Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa signed a 1-year deal with the Atlanta Falcons. He will join Michael Penix Jr. on that roster heading into next season. What is your outlook on the Falcons? Was this a good move on their part? Is Tua too injury prone? What concerns or what benefits do you think come along with this trade?
I don't really think that it was a good move on Atlanta's part. He's just too injury prone with too many concussions that he had over the last 2 or 3 years, and I just don't know how he will fit in with that roster there in Atlanta. And I know Michael Penix Jr. really stepped up this last year, but due to the fact with his torn ACL, we will see how good he can play in the spring and the summer and coming into this next season. But I hope that Tua Tagovailoa can get away from his injury prone and he can move on and play the game that he loves.
Then in other big trade news, I'm going to kind of gloss over this because I feel like there's just some big NBA news that recently came out that needs to be discussed, and we'll get into that. But Mike Evans signed a 3-year deal with the San Francisco 49ers worth up to $68.4 million. This deal includes $16.3 million guaranteed dollars. He will be leaving the Buccaneers for the San Francisco 49ers. And in my opinion, this is a really big move for San Francisco. Obviously, they've struggled with injuries at receiver with Brandon Ayuk and other pieces. Ricky Pearsall has been in and out of the lineup. So this is a big-time move to get a future Hall of Fame wide receiver in Mike Evans. I think this might push them into sort of the Super Bowl conversation, guys, especially if Fred Warner comes back next year healthy. They get some other pieces back. Obviously, we know the Niners have been one of the more injury-prone teams, so we'll have to pay attention to that. Mike Evans, obviously not a young guy. He's been in the league for a long time now. But obviously a big-time piece if he can stay healthy and help lead that team, potentially to a Super Bowl. What are your thoughts on that, Zach?
I really like that move on the Niners' part because with that kind of money, they know what kind of player they're getting in that wide receiver. And I hope that he can live up to those standards of all that money that he's being paid now. But also, Tampa Bay was a great place for him over the last 12-year run in Tampa Bay. So maybe this is a good move, a new change of scenery for him and his family, and I hope the best for him.
Remember, he tied Jerry Rice's all-time consecutive 1,000-yard season mark with 11 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. So the consistency over the course of his career, obviously he struggled some with injuries last year, but I think this is a great move. A guy who's been a model of consistency over the course of his career, 11 straight 1,000-yard seasons in Tampa Bay, and I think he's going to be a great asset to the San Francisco 49ers and their Super Bowl hopes. And we're going to get into the Chiefs real quick. They signed Kenneth Walker III, a 3-year deal worth $43.05 million, $28.5 million guaranteed. The Chiefs added him to an already good offense. Defensive tackle Chris Tonga and Kansas City also agreed to a 3-year, $21 million contract that includes $14 million in guaranteed money. Obviously, two big additions for Kansas City. They need help on the defensive line with Chris Jones potentially getting older or leaving. And then Kenneth Walker, a Super Bowl MVP. We know how depleted they've been at running back. Also, Rashee Rice might be suspended to begin the season due to some legal issues. So that'll be very interesting to see how that story develops. We'll see how Mahomes comes back next year. I know initial reports were saying Mahomes was going to be ready by the first game of the season. We'll see if that transpires or not. But obviously a little bit of hope in Kansas City. They missed the playoffs this year, but a little bit of light shining there.
I really like that move, to be honest. You have Patrick Mahomes, Kenneth Walker, Travis Kelce, and some other key parts that they have there. And I think Kenneth Walker will really fit in, but I really am kind of shocked that Seattle would want to move on from him after the season that he had. But all good things come to an end, and hopefully he will transition quickly into this new move with the Chiefs, and I hope the best for him.
And obviously, one last NBA topic before we get into the one last NFL topic. I'm sorry, before we get into the NBA stuff, was Max Crosby trade was off. Max Crosby trade to the Ravens is off after a failed physical. Very interesting stuff coming out of Las Vegas and Baltimore. Obviously, the Ravens backed out of the trade agreement after a failed physical. We saw that. What's your reaction to that? I mean, one of the best defensive players in football failing a physical will not be going to Baltimore as of right now. What's your thoughts on that?
I was a little shocked when I found that out today. I mean, a failed physical, that is worrying. That is worrisome to me, that a failed physical means that he will not suit up for a new team, and maybe he will be going back to Vegas, but who knows. But failing a physical is a really big deal, and I think the Baltimore Ravens really screwed that one up.
Well, and it's interesting because I think he would have been a great asset to that group.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
And I think, with his ability to rush the passer, obviously the Ravens were not the best team in pass rushing last year. Their defense was kind of a struggle, which usually is not typical of Ravens culture, but they were in the bottom half of the league in defense last year. We obviously know what Max Crosby brings to the table for Vegas, that great pass rusher there, one of the best in the NFL. So it's really a shame that this happened. I think for both teams, because now what's Vegas getting for Max Crosby, or what are they getting with Max Crosby? A failed physical was obviously a massive deal, and I think that it's just a really unfortunate situation that this had to happen the way it did.
And I also think the first rounders that they were trading for are going back to Baltimore, so that is also a worry to that team.
But we got to get into the big news today, which is the NBA, and this is one of the big reasons I'm coming on right this very moment, is Bam Adebayo of the Miami Heat. My goodness, what a game he had. 83 points. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna let that one sink in for a second. This man had the second highest scoring game in the history of the NBA. 83 points, beating Kobe Bryant's record by 2. I just want to get your raw reaction to this, Zach. Coming from a guy like Bam Adebayo, obviously he's an all-star. He's a great player. He's been putting up good numbers this year, 20 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists. But to have an 80-point outburst in a big-time 150-129 win over the Washington Wizards, just put this into perspective for us, Zach.
I think it's a milestone that no player has ever reached before besides Kobe Bryant when he had that 81-point game. And I don't know if it'll happen again in the near future, or maybe this season with only a couple weeks left in the regular season. But I'm hoping that one player can step up and change that record and have a new season record going forward. But I'm really excited for Bam Adebayo. I know this probably meant a lot to him. I wonder if he watched Kobe Bryant's 81-point game last night before tonight.
I was going to say you probably watched Space Jam last night with Michael Jordan, because my goodness, he was going crazy. And you look at his field goal percentages. I want to go over this for a second. He shot 43 field goals and 43 free throws in this game.
My goodness.
That is wild, to say the least. I mean, this guy's 20 for 43 on field goals. So, again, not a great percentage, not even 50% from the field. But 36 of 43 on free throws. 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. I mean, just one of the great performances we've ever seen. Maybe the greatest performance we've ever seen from an NBA player on an NBA court. And a Miami Heat franchise record, obviously. Second biggest scoring outburst in NBA history. This is obviously the biggest thing we had to hop on here and cover today because, I mean, I'm just in disbelief. I saw that news and I was like, wow, it's just astonishing. I mean, Bam is a great player, but certainly not the guy you'd expect an 83-point game from. But
what do you think that fan base is feeling right about now?
man, they've got to be hyped. I mean, I know the Heat haven't really had the season they've wanted. Obviously, they've had some struggles. They're just 37-29. They're like a fringe playoff team. But obviously, this is just such a big milestone for them, and it could be a franchise-altering game. This is something that not only Heat fans are going to remember for decades, but that NBA fans are going to remember for decades. I mean, think about it. We haven't really forgotten much in 20 years since Kobe Bryant's 81-point game. People still talk about it. People still remember it. I can't imagine this would be any different. I know some people are going to say, oh, he shot 36 free throws, or well, shot 43 free throws, made 36 of them. Obviously, you know, there was a lot of fouls in that game, but it's still pretty impressive to drop 83 points in an NBA game, and to make 36 free throws is still unbelievable, and obviously just massive kudos to him, and one of the biggest time moments we've ever seen, and that's, I think, why this kind of stuff needs to be covered.
Let me ask you this. Do you think in the near future we'll ever see another NBA player break his record and have 84 points?
Well, obviously, one of the biggest time records I'm looking to maybe see broken, although I don't actually think this is going to happen, is breaking Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game. We've obviously heard the rhetoric that, you know, Kobe's 81-point game was more impressive than Wilt's 100-point game, and I'm sure that these same conversations will be had about Bam's Adebayo's game. Obviously, his field goal percentage wasn't great. His free throw percentage was pretty good. But obviously, the amazing part is he could have gone off for even more. You know, you talk about dropping 83 points without even shooting 50% from the field. He could have gone off for even more. So, do I think it's possible for somebody to break 83? Absolutely. And we've even seen guys the last couple of years. Donovan Mitchell had 71 in a game. You know, Damian Lillard had 71. Devin Booker had 70 a few years back. And those were obviously all big-time moments for those guys. But 83 points? I mean, it's hard to put into words really what that means to the Heat franchise, to Bam Adebayo, and really in terms of the history of the NBA. We're seeing a lot of big-time scoring outbursts. And you look at the final score here, 150-129. Very high-scoring game, a lot of offense. And obviously, a lot of people are going to say it's bad basketball. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of that. But Alex Sarr, the other guy on the Wizards, their center, had 28 points as well on 12 of 19 shooting. So he had a good game, but obviously overshadowed by Bam Adebayo's 83 points. And I mean, it's just amazing the level of offensive production that these guys can put together. Even at times on bad shooting nights. 20-43, not a great shooting night. But clearly the output was crazy.
I think you're totally right with all of that. And I believe every word that you have just said.
Well, I think that's about going to wrap things up. Obviously, there's been a lot to cover. And hopefully next time we'll have a lot more about Utah sports content. That obviously is what this podcast is about. But I think another big part of what we're trying to do is cover all the big sports stories around the NBA, the NFL. We saw a lot of big trades happening with Tua, with Max Crosby's trade getting canceled. And then to have a historic night with Bam Adebayo's 83 points to cap it all off. It's been an unbelievable day in sports. and I think it just has to be covered on this podcast. And so I really wanted to make sure that we covered that all appropriately. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, make sure to go on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Subscribe and turn on post notifications so you never miss our content and another episode of our podcast. And I just want to thank Zach for being a great partner in all of this. And obviously, we'll be back on our next episode. So thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you on episode 5.